So we're going to begin soon. Thought maybe some would be coming in person, but it looks like you're all online. So I'm going to wait. I would appreciate if you turn your videos on because it's very hard to connect to empty boxes on a screen. Thank you, Steve. And there's someone else. Hi. If no one else comes in the next couple of minutes, I'm probably going to go up to my office and just do this online because it's easier. So let's just sit together for a couple of minutes and let things settle. So I'm going to go up to my office and teach this online. It'll be easier for me actually easier to connect with you from my computer. So I'll be right with you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Let's see who's here. Paul, Linda, Steve. So, what would you like to talk about tonight? What's up for you?
For me, things are going pretty well.
Okay.
like to talk about whatever you had listed on the website.
Okay, I will. I'll do that.
Really good topic for current times.
Okay. So we are living in interesting times, to say the least, and dark times, I think we could say, and it's easy to become jaded. It's easy to become cynical. It's easy to be disheartened, depressed, discouraged, kind of taken down. And a lot of people are. There's a lot of trauma in the culture. There's a lot of addiction. There's quite a bit of suicide. And so people are suffering. And the question, I think the live question is, how do we show up? How do we practice in a time when everything is falling apart, where almost all of many of the social and political institutions are dysfunctional, where authority is not respected in journalism, in government, in law, in religion? What can we trust then? Live in this kind of postmodern soup now, and it's pretty chaotic. So I'd like to start with a koan from the Gateless Gate, koan number 45, and it's called "Who Is That One?" So Wu Tzu said, Shakyamuni and Maitreya are servants of that one. Who is that one? Who is that one? You know, Shakyamuni is Shakyamuni Buddha. Maitreya is the future Buddha to come. They're both servants of that one. Who is that one? That's the koan. And Wu Tzu is an interesting teacher. We have several cases of his in the Gateless Gate. His successor was Wanwu or Engo, who actually created the Blue Cliff Record or edited the Blue Cliff Record. So that's pretty impressive. He, like many Zen teachers, was pretty discouraged with some of the teachings around him. So he began studying the mind only, or the Yogacara school, which teaches that everything is nothing but mind, and that wisdom appears when there's no differentiation between subject and object. And the founder of that school in China was Wang Zhang, and he traveled. This would have been really early Chinese Zen Buddhist time. In the very early days of Chan in China, monks were going to India to translate sutras. And Wanzang went to India and Asia, Southeast Asia, spent 20 years learning Sanskrit. And there's a story that when he was in India, they had a tradition of engaging in debates. And this is one of the reasons, perhaps, why Buddhism actually started to develop more philosophical schools, because the way this worked was that if you lost the debate, you and your entire party had to convert to the other side that won the debate. So there was a very, people wanted to get good at doing debates.
High stakes.
Good at stake. And so that's
and so there's a story that Wang Zong was visiting a Buddhist temple in India, and some great teacher, a non-Buddhist, came and challenged the text that the temple was promoting. And that text was a Yogacara text that articulated the non-duality, the fundamental teaching of Yogacara. There is no duality. There is no world, objectified world out there separate from the subjective world in here. There is no difference. And so the contending teacher that was challenging the temple said, if there is wisdom in non-duality, this non-opposition where subject and object are absent, then who is having the wisdom? Who is it? And what is the wisdom for? Kind of like this koan, right? Who is that one? Who does the Buddha serve? Who is that one? And no one in the temple could answer. So Wan Zong answered, and he said, it's like drinking water. Whether it is cold or hot, only the person who drinks will know. So because the questioner's the question was so abstract and Wan Zong's answer was so direct, there was no issue here. Temple remained Buddhist, and the tradition survived. So there's a commentary for this koan. Wumon says, if you can see this other or this one and distinguish him or her clearly, then it is like encountering your father at the crossroads. So when we begin a spiritual path like Zen, we go looking for something, some kind of wisdom, something. We've heard that Zen is worthwhile. We've heard stories. We've read stories of people having Kensho or Satori or whatever. And we go looking for the Dharma. And we most always go looking for it outside somewhere, in a text, in a teacher. But all the teachers say the same thing. Don't look for it outside of yourself. It's right here, right now. So this teaching is very direct. There's no, it's not subtle. Do you have the courage to take responsibility for your own life? Do you have the courage to be with your own experience, all of it, the good and the bad, the persona you present to the world and the shadow you hide from it? Do you have the courage to be with both? And I think that's I think that's the first question that's facing us in any time, but including this time, that when we live in a time of so much confusion, where we're just bombarded by information, and now we've got AI on top of that, and it's a kind of cognitive dissonance and just being tired. I mean, it's just hard to, who do you trust? Who can you trust? Perhaps you can trust that one. But what would that mean, to trust that one? Who is this one? Who are you? Who am I? Who are we? Are we the story that we tell ourselves? Are we the, we all have a bio. Is that who we are? Obviously, Zen would say there's something more than that. So who is that one? And I think the challenge of this time is, how do we show up here with kindness, with attention, with care, when everything around us is just dismal and in many ways corrupt. When the world around us is not just falling apart, but is morally bankrupt in so many ways, then how do we show up with integrity? How do we show up with patience? And I actually think that the spiritual question here is, how do we find gratitude? Because I think that's kind of the heart of the matter. We would say in my tradition, we say, trust the Dharma. You can trust the Dharma because it's sane. So what is the Dharma? Well, in Buddhism, that word means a lot of different things. It means the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. It means the early sutras that recorded his teachings, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, 5 skandhas, on and on. That's one meaning of the Dharma, but we also mean by the Dharma the way the world works. Well, how does the world work? It seems to do just fine without us. In fact, it'd probably do better without us if we just get out of the way, mucking up the works. But hey, every day the sun comes up. You can kind of count on that. Flowers bloom. Bees go to the flowers. You can count on that until there's no more bees. Grass grows, it's green. That's Dharma, the way things self-organize. There doesn't need to be a deity outside of that to make that work. The Dharma is the way the world works. And it's just a wonderful mystery that we are here at all, that we are alive. What an amazing thing. And yet, I think we don't really appreciate gratitude so much because we have too much. We have too much abundance. And so it kind of, in cultures where people don't have a lot, they appreciate what they have. Poor people aren't necessarily poor. Their circumstances are poor, but they could be rich in spirit and very resourceful in terms of surviving. So part of the story, part of the corruption of our culture is that the story we get constantly, it's about accumulation, it's about consuming, it's about winning, it's about getting money. And none of that really has much to do with what we're talking about here. In fact, it just gets in the way. So I think it was Brother David said that joy is the happiness that doesn't depend on anything happening. And I think joy and gratitude are very closely connected. And I think this is also connected to a kind of letting go. Instead of always wanting to control and accumulate and acquire, you start to see that, you know what, we have enough. What we have already is more than enough, actually. We live in a pretty rich culture. We have enough. And yet, rich people always think they need more. They need another 30 billion before they'll be, it's insane. So I think that the part of the spirit of Zen is, first of all, trusting the sanity of the Dharma. It's another way of saying that is just trusting the sanity of the way things are here. They're actually quite sane. And we can trust that. We can actually count on the seasons. We can count on the sun coming up. I think I can count on that. There's a lot of things I can count on, but I can count on the sun rising tomorrow morning. And I can count on the seasons, although sometimes they're getting a little bit more unpredictable. So that trust, that comes with a kind of patience. When you really let go into the kind of the mystery of what life actually is here and how it is for you, it's just a wonder, a mystery. And if we're filled with that wonder, what comes with that is gratitude and love and beauty, even when things are dark. There's a story of a guy falling off a cliff, and he's falling to his death, but he picks a strawberry as he's falling down. He tastes that strawberry. That's so good. That kind of surrender that I think the spiritual path is pointing at is about really realizing that the universe is trustworthy. The universe is trustworthy, and the universe will provide. Early in my training, my Zumi Roshi used to tell me, because I was full of doubt and full of questions, and he'd say, Joshin, just trust the Dharma and the Dharma will provide. Hard to trust like that, though. Hard to trust like that. Material culture that doesn't trust that at all. It only trusts how much money you have in your bank account. Only trusts how many likes you have on Facebook. So I think part of the way I answer the question of how to show up here, because it's difficult. I think things are really, really tenuous and difficult. And some people are optimistic, some people aren't. Some people think we'll get out of it, some people don't. I don't know. I can't particularly control global warming, but I can have some influence on the people around me. And I can still show up here with kindness and maybe some humor. Humor is good too. So I think there's a way that we can proclaim the Dharma. I think not only is it a matter of showing up here with kindness, but showing up for the things that count, which requires courage. So I think the other path here, who is that one, is the Bodhisattva. And another way of saying that is a spiritual warrior. Things begin when we commit. And until you make a commitment to the spiritual path, nothing really happens. It's all in the commitment that you make. So if you don't commit to something sane, then who is that one? You keep looking for him or her. You think that the teaching is something that you're going to find in a sutra? Or by reading another book on Zen? Why are you looking for it there when it's right here, right now? You can't gain this, you don't possess it, but you can't lose it either. It's not about gain and loss. In fact, it really has nothing to do with time or space or any of those concepts that come out of our culture. And that's why it's actually slightly refreshing, is that there is a possibility of finding something here that is eternal. I know it sounds strange to say it, but who is that one? So I think a lot of the suffering in our culture comes out of a kind of a mindset of scarcity, that I don't have enough. There's not enough to go around. And maybe there's more than enough. We have this teaching in the Foundations of Mindfulness, the second class, we teach about shame. And that whole class is about what gets in the way of being on the Zen path. And I think one of the first things that gets in the way is some poverty mentality, that I'm not good enough for this. I'm not that one. Must be somebody else. So when you have that mindset of scarcity, you say to yourself, I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. I don't have enough. But what if you said, I am enough? What if you said, I am that one, without apologizing? It's there's this story that when the Buddha came out of the side of his mother and he was born, he stood up and he pointed to the earth, and you see these pictures of the baby Buddha pointing to the heaven and to the earth, and he's saying, and he said, above the heavens and below the earth, I alone am the only honored one. Who's that one? So when we have enough, I think gratitude is about appreciating the simple things, the really simple things. I had a hip operation in April. I'm really grateful I can walk again. And I used to take that for granted when I was younger. I don't take those things for granted so much anymore. So I think with if you don't have a poverty mentality, then you can actually appreciate that something here is abundant. There's actually more than enough to go around. And it's not a question of material wealth. It's a question of the heart, opening the heart, and finding that this doesn't cost anything to open our hearts. It's free. And when we open our hearts, we have more, we can be generous, and we feel better when we're generous. We're not so selfish. We can be kinder. And I think we can have gratitude is something that grows. It's appreciation appreciates. That's a different kind of bank account. Different kind of interest. So I think when we have a big commitment, and in the commitment in our practice is the Bodhisattva vow. We take this vow to save all sentient beings. That's a pretty big commitment. When you make that kind of commitment, then things follow from that. Then your life falls into a certain way of being in service to others. And then the little things that you used to worry about, and a lot of the stuff that we worry about is kind of small. When you take a big vow like the Bodhisattva vow, all those small things don't really matter so much. I remember Maizumi Roshi was giving a talk, and someone asked him something like, Christians have God. What do you Buddhists have? And Maizumi Roshi said, we have vow. We take a vow. We live by a vow. That's the same. Isn't that faith? Isn't that the same thing as having faith? To live by a vow? To live by some large vow to be of service to everyone, unconditionally be of service, not just the people you like, not just your tribe or your family, but the people you don't like. They're included too. That's where it gets hard. So a big vow can challenge us because there's no possibility that we're going to fulfill it in any way that's perfect. We're going to fall. We're going to fail, essentially, continually. But you still have the vow. You can still take that vow to live that way. You can vow to live by that spirit. And none of us do it perfectly, but I think the vow is what makes the difference. Then everything falls into place. Then you have meaning and purpose. And no matter how dark the world gets, no matter how corrupt the world is around us, you can show up here. And some days we're not going to show up very well. Some days we're going to get taken down, but there's a kind of resilience in this vow that you pick yourself up and you start again. We fail. I made a New Year's resolution this year. I was going to, be okay breaking a few things. And I have broken quite a few already. And some I didn't want to break. So we may take a vow to be of service to everyone, but we still create karma and we hurt others. And we will. That doesn't mean you can't take this vow. And I think taking this vow comes from a place of sad and tender heart, opening our heart. The Poles have this wonderful saying, and they should know, that the only open heart is a broken heart. And we call that in the Buddhist tradition bodhicitta, awakened heart. Now, I'm sure that in our culture, most people think that's weakness. But in my tradition, we think of that as one of the greatest strengths, and something that helps us be resilient in the face of suffering, because you kind of almost, and this sounds weird to say it, but you could almost be grateful for the suffering because it teaches you something. And in fact, if you think of some of the times in your life when when you had some of the hardest challenges, and at the time that you went through them, you were miserable. But if you reflect on it, 10 years later, you might realize, you know what, I learned something in that time when I was miserable and depressed. I actually learned something really important. And so I could be, maybe with hindsight, looking back on it with a little distance, I could be grateful for the suffering too. See, that's a totally different mindset than a poverty mentality, a material way of looking at the world, where there's never enough, where I'm never enough, I'm never good enough. It's a race to the bottom. And in my tradition, we call that samsara, the wheel of suffering, because there's no joy there. There may be brief moments of happiness, but that happiness is ephemeral and it doesn't last. And it's not the same thing as joy, and it's not the same thing as gratitude. And I think the heart of most spiritual traditions and many indigenous cultures is the simplicity of having our natural generosity and kindness and gratitude. And that's what makes communities have a heart in the first place. I know something about this because I'm trying to build an online community, and I'm working with a lot of entrepreneurs that are trying to build online communities. And I have a really good fortune to have a Sangha here at the Zen Center. So I know something about what a treasure the Sangha community is, because I'm in one. And a lot of these people are trying to build communities online, and I think that's very hard to do. And very often, I think really what they're calling a community, they should be calling clients, because they're entrepreneurs. And what they're building are transactional relationships, and that is not what a community is. I forget his name now. He wrote a wonderful book called The Gift That Moves, and I often talk about it because it had a profound influence on me when I read it. And the basic teaching is, in almost all indigenous cultures, is what glues the community together is the gift that moves. When you walk into indigenous people's homes, you have to be careful, because if you appreciate some painting on the wall, they're likely to give it to you. So you have to be really careful. They're generous like that. And the idea of the gift that moves is, it's not something that gets put away in the bank in a vault. It's alive with stories, because someone gave it to their daughter, and then their daughter gave it to their neighbor. And each time they give this thing to somebody, it carries a story of all the people before that have it. And that gift that moves, that generosity, is what makes a community such a treasure. And I guess the last thing I would say, which I'm really working on a lot now here at the Zen Center, is I think we shouldn't take our Sangha for granted, that we are going to need, in the times we are facing in the times to come, which I think will not be better, they'll be worse. We are going to need families and communities as islands of sanity, where we can go to trust some teaching that is outside of the community, our culture's, I don't know, the stories we get from our culture are not very helpful for the most part. And so maybe we could have a little discussion about this, or comments or questions. That's pretty much what I wanted to talk about tonight.
Yeah,
Oh, go
I'd like to
ahead.
say when um about the time I took the vow, but it's something that kind of made it come alive for me. It wasn't a sutra teaching, it wasn't studying koans,
Uh-huh.
it was actually a song. It's a classical choral song. It's a beautiful piece of music, but the words are taken from a poem. And the poem was written by a guy in the 1930s, in the middle of the Depression.
Uh-huh.
And he was, distraught everywhere he looked. There was misery and suffering and bread lines and people starving. Of course, he had no idea he was sitting on the precipice of World War II. But there's a couple of short lines in that poem where he says, kindness must watch for me on this side of the ground. So like he's done looking for it. All he sees is misery. There is no compassion. There is no love. So now kindness has to come look for me. I'm done looking for it. On this side of the ground, well, I'm still alive. Not I'm 6 feet under. Then at the end of the poem, he says, he realizes he's alone. He says, I wait for wonder, wandering far alone. He realizes that he's alone. There's no one to help. There's no one out there to save him.
Yeah.
He's still looking. So I'm thinking, well, where is compassion, and love, and empathy? What happened to it anyway? And it really, nothing's happened to it. It hasn't gone anywhere. It doesn't have to look for it. It's right where it's always been, and that's inside you.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of began to connect to this Bodhisattva vow.
Yeah, and I think until you have that kind of opening of your heart, you feel like the world is always happening to you. And then you're always in the place of feeling like you're a victim. And gosh knows, we've all had that. All we're young teenagers at one point where we carried that chip around on our shoulders that we had suffered so much and we thought the world owed us something. And that doesn't work very well, turns out. So I'd be curious to know what that poem is, Linda.
Well, the poem is like 46 pages, and
Oh.
the music, he just took a section of this music.
Uh-huh.
Say about it later. Oh, sure, on this shining night. I'll show. I can give it to you later.
Okay. Yeah, I saw a documentary about the Dust Bowl, and I think that was from about the 30s to the 38. And boy, that was during the Depression, and it was boy, that was rough, really rough. But we brought it on ourselves in many ways by over farming. There was a lot of greed after World War I because they were making a lot of money growing grain in the Midwest because the price of grain had gone up during World War I. So then they just plowed up everything and plowed up all the topsoil. And geez, then they had the Dust Bowl. And there were actually, I remember in this documentary, there were companies that were actually suggesting, like cement companies said, we could just pour asphalt over the whole Midwest and that would cure the problem. And we would just like make holes where the plants could come out of the asphalt. This is actually a serious suggestion by some business.
Wow.
Could we be more out of touch with the planet? So yeah, I think, and I also think that much of our ill with global warming is a spiritual problem as much as it is anything else. And we do not treat the planet with respect. We treat everything as a resource to make so. Anyone else? Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I really enjoyed your talk a lot, and really enjoyed meditating when I can during the week with the Sangha.
Yeah.
And that 45 minutes, for me, it takes that amount of time to get to that point of peace inside me.
Yeah.
And I've been studying on my own. I'm still just at the reading part, but trying my best to put these things in action. And I would say the toughest thing is the more I find those peaceful points within myself, there's this frustration with the outside world that, this is a simple and hard thing at the same time, but just like the outside world just becomes that much more noisy. And I think that the tough thing is, I know how much work this is for myself, but how do you work with, starting with your loved ones and the rest of the community, to get some kind of change to happen when what people, people in our culture, achievement is accumulation, not trying to strip down to the essence of yourself, and what it is that, where happiness actually is. It's that peaceful core within each of us. Like, how do you go about doing that and not succumb to the rest of the noise? It's just kind of a challenge, but
It is challenging. Well, I would say the first thing is, if you look at the Yogacara school of Buddhism, that basic philosophy is there is no world outside of us. We objectify that world as a world of things, but that's just a projection. And so if there isn't a world outside, then the world out there is me. And I think what comes with that is a kind of a dawning shock that I'm not innocent, that I actually am participating in that noise on some level. And it doesn't mean that it has to do me in, but it gives me a kind of sense of humility about approaching others, and may not be so important that I change others as that I change myself, so that I can allow enough space to listen to them and allow their gifts to emerge by being more skillful and patient. And that's kind of the sense of the precepts in our tradition, is you become the courage of a spiritual warrior is not that we're conquering something out there in the world. It takes courage to look at ourselves, and to look at yourself means to look at not just the good parts, but the ugly parts too, all the parts. And so if the world out there isn't separate from me, then I have a keener sense that I'm projecting much of the time, and a lot more patience, and I think more patience for how people appear to suffer and to be idiots half the time. And I have judgments about that, but notice that anytime we perceive a difference, we kind of, a judgment or a value judgment comes with that. So then I think the larger and more difficult practice is allowing that difference to be there, and trying to find, not to demonize people, but to find what is the motivation behind their worldview. What is the story that they have that causes them to have that conspiracy theory or whatever it is? And instead of trying to change what people think, that's a fool's errand. You're not going to change anybody's mind. We're all stubborn as hell. So, forget trying to change anyone's mind, but if you listen to somebody with empathy, deep listening is we don't know how to do that. So when you listen to someone deeply, it can be transformative for that person. But you're not changing them. It's like everyone has a seed of we call it Tathagata. Everyone has this seed of awakeness in them. So if we know how to nurture and nourish it in ourselves, then you kind of know how to do that with others. That's kind of implied, that if you can do it for yourself, then you can do it with others. But it requires a lot of patience and a lot of I think the practice often is eating your projection, which is it's not a pleasant meal, I can tell you. I've had to eat mine many times. It's not what we're going to do, but if you're practicing, you're kind of seeing that more, and that's very humbling. So yeah, there's a lot of, not to say there's not a lot of idiotic stuff going on in our culture and people behaving poorly. But as a bodhisattva, you're not taking the vow because the world is lovely and everyone's, you don't take this vow because everyone's having a good time and they're all wise and they love wisdom. You take the vow because nobody loves wisdom. And so then you work, you become more patient with people's you just become more patient with people and and you don't give up on them. You don't really give up on people. That's hard because we take things personally and we hold grudges and we don't forgive people that have hurt us. And we get stuck there easily. And and that kind of can dry up your heart. So I think part of what comes with gratitude and generosity is a generous spirit of not giving up on anyone, even the people that have hurt us. And that just means we can be a bigger container. When we take a vow, we can actually be a bigger container. And it's not about me so much. I don't have to take it personally. I can see that the person hurt me, I can see their suffering and, they're having a bad day or whatever. And I don't have to, so there's all kinds of skills, I think, that come with practice of wisdom that allow us to be compassionate. But I think the wisdom begins with yourself. It just begins with working with yourself. So it's great. You spend 45 minutes and you notice at the end, you feel just a little, sense of being wholesome. It feels good. But you just keep going with that.
And that's the tough part, is developing compassion for yourself, because that's the model that enables you to be compassionate for others.
Yeah.
But that's the challenge too, is when someone has ticked you off, to flip your anger over and try to see maybe the motivation for why someone has done something that's annoying,
Well, I think it's important when it comes to forgiveness practice, and I do workshops on this. So I think if someone has really betrayed you, you have every right to be angry. And but if that anger takes up residence in your heart, then it will hurt you and not the other person. So it's
secondary,
and it takes time. It may take a long time. It may take years to forgive someone, and then you realize that you've been a victim this whole time, and it's taking you down. It's the psychic baggage that you've been carrying around, and you say life is too short for that. I don't want to do that anymore. So you forgive someone. You may or may not talk to them. You may not ever want to see them again, but you don't wish them harm once you forgive them. There's that. When we don't forgive someone, we actually would celebrate if something bad happened to them. We're like that. So I think a lot of the practice is learning to trust our open, generous heart and finding that, it just feels better to be generous than it does to be stingy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the early mistakes people make when they practice is trying to communicate it to others.
Right.
Trying to tell people what meditation is probably a mistake. Let me tell you about meditation, how peaceful it is when I do it.
Yeah.
It's not going to go over well with the other person.
It doesn't.
You think I need meditation? Oh, yeah, you could really benefit if you did it like me.
Watch him start wandering off.
Yeah, exactly. I have not converted anyone yet, so.
It's a lonely practice from that point of view.
Yes.
Are we willing to, again, I think that's part of the bravery of the spiritual warrior, is you willing to be alone with yourself long enough to see everything. And a lot of things you see are not pleasant. They're ugly. We all have a shadow. And, when we go to sleep at night, we often do things in our dreams that are just outrageous. We kill people and we do things that we would never do in our waking life. And you get that feeling, you wake up, you said, oh my God, I was doing that. That couldn't have been me. But you were actually doing that in your dream. And it was and so we have this kind of split in ourselves. We have the shadow that gets split off. And if you're not, we call it spiritual bypassing. If you're not owning your shadow in a healthy psychological way, then your spiritual path pays for it. Because you actually get stuck. You can't go further on a spiritual path if you haven't integrated your shadow, because no one will trust you. You won't be trustworthy unless you. We know this intuitively about people that have owned their shadow, that they're. If someone hasn't owned their shadow, they're too innocent, they're too pure. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think anyone can do that. So then you just don't quite trust them. There's something that isn't quite right about. They're just too good. So I think that also comes. So the part of the courage of being a bodhisattva, doing this path, is you willing to show up again and again for meditation, to be alone with yourself. And sometimes you don't want to do it, but you do it.
The hard sit.
You find that over time you can actually, you become a bigger container. You can hold those parts of yourself that you didn't like before. And they kind of become fertilizer rather than a poison.
And those are the and of course you're not supposed to chase after it when you're meditating, but just some of the surprising stuff that bubbles up to the surface.
And
it's a lot of times it's a shock and a surprise. It's like, wow, that was actually in there. That's in me, We call anything that comes up in meditation a makyo. In Japanese, it means delusion. Or anything that you hang on to in the meditation becomes a delusion, especially satori or kensho. So if you have a big, wonderful experience in meditation, it's easy to get attached to it. Say, dai kensho. That's a big we call that a big makyo, because then you're stuck on that. And then every time you sit after that, you think, what happened to the dai kensho? I'm not having it today. Where's the love? Where's the love here? I'm looking around. It's kind of dreary. And then you're measuring everything by that, and then nothing works. So
elusive.
Right.
So you say anything that comes up that you get excited about, or that is really painful, or it might even be traumatic, is a kind of makyo that if we get stuck on it. I mean, the point of meditation is to keep things simple. We're not trying to analyze. We're not doing therapy exactly, and we're not analyzing our shadow. We're just being with the shit. Just let it be there. And then somehow it becomes workable because you've allowed it in. But you haven't made a big deal out of it in, no drama particularly, but you're just a little wiser for it, I think. Yeah. It's a wonderful practice. It just, yeah, I'm so glad that you're sitting with us sometime in the morning. We have that online community. How
Oh,
you
that
doing,
can just sit.
Paul? Yeah, to just sit. How are you doing, Paul?
Good. Good. Actually, plan on coming to. I was going to come there today, but I got running late, and so I'm online. And then I'm planning to come to yoga tomorrow. And
Good.
but yeah, that kind of that judging is a hard, difficult thing to, trying to figure out what other people's motivations are when they're upsetting you, and yeah, that's kind of a difficult thing for me.
Yeah, I think it helps to be curious, just to be curious about why people have the belief they have.
Yeah.
Then instead of just inviting their opinion or having an argument about their point of view, you might find a story that they have that why they believe the way they do, and there's some story in their life that gave rise to that view, and that story would tell you something about their motivation.
Yeah. Another thing is that self-compassion is kind of hard too. I like myself, that it's kind of, I guess, counterintuitive with our culture, I guess, or something.
Well, I think it's I think it's that I am enough. I think it's going, you're that one that the Buddha is talking about. Who's the one? And knowing you're enough isn't necessary. It's not narcissistic. In other words, you're not obsessing about yourself in the same way, which is why you actually like yourself better, because you have a little bit more dignity than you had before. You're not so preoccupied with all your little stuff, and so you show up in a little larger way with a little bit more generosity, and then everything isn't about you. It's also about what other people are experiencing, and you're not separating yourself from others anymore. So then that kind of, when you start having that natural generosity, you feel better about yourself. It's not
I definitely do. If I help other people, I feel better. And definitely like at work. And
I think it's catching.
Yeah, like helping other people out, or just trying to make their day a little better. Or
Yeah, we all know what that's like when we are generous, then we feel better. You just feel better as a human being.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, let's face it, when things are like they are now, and there's a lot of fear, people get really selfish, and they behave poorly. But people are they're coming from a place of fear because they don't know how to be with uncertainty. So then they grasp for some ideology or a conspiracy theory, something that makes them feel more secure, that they can hang on to that. And it's not that they're bad people, it's just that they're scared. And if you see that someone is scared, then you have a way in to being with them that's more empathic and a little kinder than trying to argue with them. So there's a lot of fear right now. People are really scared and unsettled. And I think there's a lot of deep kind of existential angst going on. And no one knows what to do with it, including all of us. We're all having it too, which is why I think this is the live question I'm bringing up now, is how do we show up in a time when there's really an existential situation where everything is at stake, the planet species, everything is at stake. Nothing. We've never been in a time like this before, I don't think. So it's epic. And wow, what an interesting time to be alive.
Yeah. Like, what can you trust, right? I mean, some of that.
Yeah, so the things that we used to trust, we probably can't trust anymore. Yeah,
Mhm.
and AI will take good care of that. You know, we won't be able to trust a lot of things, but you can trust the Dharma.
Yeah.
So we're lucky. We're really fortunate to have heard a teaching that has so much sanity in it. At least I feel that way. I feel really lucky because without this, I probably wouldn't even be alive today. I would have put myself in a long time ago. So, you know, the Bodhisattva vow is to have heard the vow is such a auspicious thing in this lifetime. To hear such a teaching is pretty amazing. And, you know, maybe hopefully in our next life we'll hear it again.
Yeah.
If we're not reborn as a mosquito.
Yeah.
So I hope this has been helpful.
Definitely. Yep. I
No.
appreciate your teachings.
Thank you all for coming. Good to have you here, Steve, with us.
Thank
Keep
you.
going. What do you do for a living, Steve?
I am a web manager for a major symphony orchestra. So,
Oh, wow.
You're a webmaster for a symphony orchestra?
yeah, for the CSO.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah.
Wow. How
It
interesting.
is it can
Oh.
be challenging. Challenging personalities. But
Yeah.
Early in my life, I tried to do web design and I gave up because people expected me to do things like in the time of a computer.
exactly.
Really frustrating.
Yeah.
I want it done yesterday. I'm only a human being. It takes so much time. It's gonna take me 3 days. 3
Yes.
days?
Yeah, 3 days.
Yeah.
It can't be done right now.
You can't do it in 3 hours?
Yeah.
No, I can't. Oh,
Creativity, isn't it right there? Yeah.
Yeah.
boy.
You hit it right on the head. That's exactly how it is.
I just couldn't handle it. It was like too stressful.
Yeah, it requires a lot of patience. So
Yeah. Yeah.
a lot of practice there. So
Yeah. Good for you. Yeah.
There's potential there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you get a lot of stuff to work with.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
You know, Tibetan teachers often used to when they travel in Tibet, they need to have a guide on the path. They would pick their worst student, the one that they didn't like, to be their guide because they would be such a good teacher for them.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine you're going on a journey, you know, for like 5 months and you pick this miserable person.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there's
That's
some
courage.
other story I just read about the Tibetan tradition where they pray for hardship, so it will give them a chance to practice.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. If you're a bodhisattva, you kind of welcome the challenges because it's an opportunity to grow and learn something new. But it depends what the degree of the hardship is.
Exactly, exactly.
I can do it this much, but that much, all bets are on. Okay, so keep going
Yes.
and support our Sangha. We need your support. We need everyone's sincerity and genuine practice in these
Yeah.
times.
It's a great song, though.
Okay. Thank you.
You're Robert.
Thank you so much.
See you guys. See Steve.
See ya.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Good night.